Hello and welcome to The Stumble. I'm your host, Jonathan Block. Today's guest has lived more lives than most folks dream about. Conor Grennan went from backpacking through Nepal to helping rescue trafficked children, from writing a New York Times bestseller to becoming Dean of Students at NYU Stern, and now he's one of the most sought-after voices on AI in the country, training dozens of teams at companies like Google, NASA, Microsoft, and many of the Fortune 500 and 100. But here's what makes Conor's approach different and this conversation different from most other AI discussions you've heard. Conor doesn't think AI is a tech problem. He thinks it's a behavior problem, a change management problem. And that insight is transforming how many of the smartest and biggest organizations in the world are thinking about adoption. For folks who haven't yet used AI, Conor recommends this approach, quote, just tell it. In other words, just tell it the task or the challenge you're facing and ask for its help. Making dinner? Tell it the ingredients you have and how much time you have and ask for a recipe that'll be ready when you're ready to sit down. Stumped as you're working with a kid on homework? Just tell it. That's it. That's the approach. Just tell it. We also get into what the Dalai Lama taught Conor about happiness, why he believes the best public speakers make mistakes on purpose, and his final piece of advice for anyone trying to stand out in a crowded world. Take a listen.
The road to leadership is never a straight line. On this podcast, I'm interviewing the world's most interesting leaders about their mountaintop moments, their stumbling blocks, and everything in between. I'm Jonathan Block, and this is Stumbling Blocks, How Great Leaders Are Made.
Well, Conor, thank you for joining the pod today. I really appreciate it. You're obviously an AI expert, among many other things, and we'll get into a lot of that today. I want to start today with just a little anecdote about AI. So you and I were texting yesterday, and I happened to be in my car, and the car is a form of AI, and Siri obviously is a form of AI. And so the car read aloud to me your text message, and it said it's a message from Conor Grennan, and here's his message. And then it said, as we're driving, do you want to reply? And I was going to say no, because I would just text you when I was done driving and try to be as safe as possible. But my 5-year-old, who was sitting in the back seat, said yes. And then he said, after it asked, what do you want to say to Conor? He said, I love you, Conor.
Amazing.
I punched the keyboard or punched the dashboard to say cancel because
no, I wish
a lot of affection
every text message back to me should read like that. That would be an amazing start to my day.
Well, Conor, so we'll get to AI in a little bit. But what I'm just genuinely fascinated by you, Conor. So you're the former of AI architecture at NYU Stern now, and you're now sort of one of the world's leading experts in the space. I've seen you speak a number of times. I've spoken alongside you, and or at the same event as you. And that's fascinating. And you're incredibly good at what you do. And when you speak, I've at this point, given what I have done in the past, seen hundreds of speakers, and you're easily one of the most engaging folks on stage that I've ever seen. And so that's sort of you, and that's the kind of the context of you. But I want to just go back in time because you have reinvented yourself a number of times, and that really is fascinating to me. So I want to kind of peel back the onion a little bit, because before you were the head of AI architecture, you were dean of students at NYU Stern. But I even want to go back before that, because if you go back in time, you wrote a book called Little Princes, based on your humanitarian work in Nepal, helping kids who were trafficked be reconnected to their families of origin, to their biological families. And so I wonder if you can sort of take us back to that moment in time, and what drove you to who Conor was before you volunteered, before you went to Nepal and volunteered at the Little Princess orphanage, and then who Conor was when you left, and why you wrote the book and then started the foundation that you started. So maybe I'll break that down. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Thanks for those kind words. It's yeah. First of all, it's super fun to be on with you. Yeah, it's I think that's right. I think it has been a lot of reinventions, but anyone who has done those kind of like reinventions, that it's not really a planned thing. It just sort of swoops up on you. But it's so funny that you asked that question, because I was literally just talking to somebody about this yesterday. about this in a way of trying to be as honest and reflective as possible on that, which is I think that I put myself in those positions because I didn't find that I was. This is verbatim what I was saying yesterday to a friend. I didn't find that I was intrinsically an interesting person, and so I kept putting myself in interesting positions so that that I had no choice but to be a more interesting person because I'm very I was always very concerned with how I appeared to the outside world, and I also really liked adventure. But even going back before that, the thing that got me to Nepal
Yeah.
it was all just a complete string of self-centered decisions, as my decisions mostly are probably, which is, coming out of college at a UVA, I didn't have I had a job, but it was only okay, and I knew I'd be making a lot less than my colleagues in DC, where you and I first connected doing kind of political consulting or something like that. And so I thought, well, you know what? If I leave the country for a few months, then I'll just be the interesting guy at parties when I come back. And
Mm.
so I decided to just pick up and move to Prague right after I graduated. I was still about 21 years old, and
As
I
one
kind of
does,
figured
just pick up and
yeah,
move to
right,
Prague. I
but
love it.
again, and it's one of these things where people would say, "Ah, that's really cool," and that was the intention. The intention was that people would say, "Oh, that's really cool that Connor did that." I mean, I thought it'd be a fun adventure, but mostly it was just, I didn't wanna be compared to everybody else, and so I thought, if I go to Prague, I don't have to do anything, and I will just be interesting, because I'll have
Mm.
done that, if that makes sense. So I kinda thought,
It
"Oh, I'll go
does,
there
yeah.
in a bar or something like that," and then I ended up stumbling into a international public policy think tank out there, and that's actually what I wanted to do with my life. And I just the other thing I think I can be good at in my life is when I see an opportunity, I just grab it and I do not let go. Right? I sort of grab the coattails of that opportunity. And so in this case, I was like, I will do anything to work here. I'll do anything to work here. And so I just worked there for free for a few weeks, and then I just they gave me a very very Prague in the 90s, very low paying, but just normal pay. Survived on pretty much nothing for whatever. Anyway, the point is that, like, I am getting somewhere with the story. Like, I
No,
ended
you're
up staying
fine.
for like 6.5 years, and I stayed for so long because I thought, this keeps me interesting because I've moved to a place where everything else around me is different, and I can still be me, but be interesting in that setting, if that makes sense. And then I moved to Brussels for about a year and a half, and then I went around the world for a year because I just decided, why not, spend all the money I had saved up, and that's how I got to Nepal. And I only went to Nepal to answer the very long-winded answer to your question. I only went to Nepal because, and I'm very open about this, is that well, I wanted to in my around the world trip, I wanted to, trek to Everest Base Camp, and I wanted to do trekking. I really love that. But I also knew that I couldn't do this around the world trip without doing some volunteering. People would think I was, a big jerk. So I had to choose something. And then I realized if I picked volunteering with orphans in Nepal, it would be the best pickup line that anybody's ever had. And so I'm like, why don't I do that? And I did it. And at first it was awful. But you can't stay in a situation like that for any amount of time and not kind of grow to love the kids that you're taking care of. And so that sort of happened. And anyway, that kind of one thing led to another. And I ended up starting an organization. I still went around the world, but I ended up going out, staying out there because the circumstances started happening around me as usual. And I just kind of grabbed and I ended up starting an organization out there. So all these things sound like, oh, that's so cool. But really, I was just putting myself in a position where I didn't have to do anything and I would be interesting to the outside world because that's what was important to me.
Well, you're characteristically, like, modest and humble, but I wanna go back to that moment where so you, have talked really openly about working in the Little Princess Orphanage for 3 months and then going on the tour, the complete your worldwide tour,
Yeah.
and then coming back
Yeah.
and doing something about what you saw, right? So you weren't just kind of the typical American, tourist who volunteers because it's a very nice thing to do and plays
Yeah.
well at a
Yeah.
bar in New York City afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, you came back. Wonder
Yeah.
why? Why did you come back?
Yeah, it's funny
What
when
drove you to
when
come
I
back?
when yeah, out of context it sounds I think it sounds awesome. Do you know what I mean? It sounds like, "Oh my gosh, it's so brave and selfless and all that kind of stuff." And I get that. But I think people that sort of like know the whole story, and the whole story's in this book that I did, but like
Yeah.
when people say, "Oh, I never could have done what you did and go back," and I'll say why I did in a second, but I was like, well, I would challenge you to read the book, and not that people have to read the book, I don't care, but but and say which part of this would you have not done? Because there's no big leap, right? I mean, everything was just a tiny step from the step before, and so the reason I went back was that I was taking care of these kids, in this orphanage, and then we found these 7 other kids that were living in, I mean, really, really abject poverty, basically almost by themselves. And we're like, oh my gosh, got to take care of them. But the problem was that we couldn't fit them in our orphanage, and so I was just kind of taking care of them, and then I'd set up a way for them to be taken by this other good orphanage that I knew, that kind of a children's home. And then the revolution broke out when all this was kind of happening, and so everybody sort of had to leave. It wasn't the safest. It wasn't the safest place at that time. And this is back in 2006, I guess. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, well, that's that. I've done my time in Nepal. It was awesome. Absolutely loved it, because I went and then I went back, and so I had, at this point, this was my second kind of like tour of duty in Nepal, because I really liked it. I really actually ended up liking it there. But, but the reason I went back after that was because I got word that when this other children's home went to go pick them up, that they weren't there. And I was like, oh no. And the word was that they'd been re-trafficked. And I was like, oh man. And even then, I didn't think, oh, well, that was my opportunity to go make a difference in the world. I was like looking for other people to go and do this kind of work. I was like, well, can anybody go find them? And everybody's like, who's gonna go find them? Like, nobody knows who they are, right? And I was like, oh man. So I'm sitting at home in the States, and I kind of I wrote to this French guy that I'd been doing a lot of this stuff with, volunteering with. I'm like, hey, I think I got to go back and try to find those kids. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to come too. So, and it was kind of like that, right? It was like that moment where you're like, you know, this is the thing that I was kind of responsible for. I didn't, it wasn't like this big, like, I'm going to go over there and do this great thing. It was just like,
Sure.
heck, man, like I had committed to taking care of them, and then not by any necessarily fault of mine, but I'd screwed that up. And I was like, if I don't do this, nobody's going to do it. And so it wasn't like a big, again, it wasn't like a big, like, I'm going to go save the world. It was more like,
Yeah.
that's your responsibility, man. And so I didn't know who else, nobody else would do it. So I just went out, went back out and looked for them.
What I mean, what I'm struck by though is that you saw a need and you filled it, and you didn't just walk away and say somebody else will take care of it, right? That's remarkable, and
Yeah.
I think it's just a great challenge to all of us, right? To see the things in our worlds, in our zip codes, or outside our zip codes, as the
Yeah.
case may be, and choose to take responsibility.
Yeah.
So, Connor, you do the work in Nepal. You launch the foundation, and then over time, you received a number of honors, including one from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I just have to ask, what was it like to meet the Dalai Lama?
It was very funny because I was there. I was just, as you are, unbelievably honored. I am, although I'm a Christian by faith, but I've always been sort of obsessed with the Dalai Lama. And even when I was in Nepal, I read his book that he collaborated with, called The Art of Happiness, and it was really pretty. I don't say a lot of books are life changing. I thought this book was really life changing for me. And just because I just think, and again, I'm not a Buddhist, but philosophically, it was just absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so when I found out I was getting this award, I was like, okay, this is unbelievable. Like, it just didn't feel real. And then the worst part was not the worst part for me. The worst part for him probably was, I'm kind of going up on stage, and I have this amazing photo. Thank God, otherwise I would still probably think that I had made it up. But I went up on stage, and he's up there on stage, and he has like sort of a visor because he's probably in front of the lights all the time, and he's pretty elderly guy. And he kind of basically, like, I got kind of like this thing put around my neck, like this kata, this sort of like ceremonial scarf, and I shook his hand, and I didn't really let go. And because you cannot be in this guy's presence, and this is not a supernatural. It's just like, I was like, this guy is unbelievable. And like, but he just has this like real peace. I think everybody says the same thing. He has this incredible like peace around him. And I just like held his hand, and I didn't want to like let go of the shake. He's like, and he kind of was giving me this like, all right, you know, the shake is done. The shake is done. So it's sort of like at that point, I kind of had to walk off stage. But it was amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. And it's not like then we went backstage and hung out. It wasn't like that. I didn't see him
Sure,
again.
sure.
But yeah, it was a memory for me. It was a really, really cool thing.
I believe it. How did his book change you?
You know, he wrote again this book called The Art of Happiness, and he collaborated with a guy who understood this how happiness works, just for, from a kind of a brain perspective, essentially, and behavior perspective, and had done all this research on it. And he collaborated with the Dalai Lama to sort of say, like, hey, here's what the research says about, like, if they do studies where if somebody like finds a $20 bill on the ground, they're much more likely to like hold the door open for the next person or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's happening there? And how does money impact happiness? And just a lot of like just really cool things where one, this researcher is really looking at, well, what's actually happening when we study what, this to this. And then he would ask the Dalai Lama, like, how do you see that? And the Dalai Lama, who is, I think, really wonderful because he really takes all faiths into consideration. He's like, well, here's what we would say as, a faith perspective. It's just like, first of all, just we believe, in Buddhism, this is what we believe. But I also, and he knows other faiths very, very well. He's like, but the Christian faith think this, and the Hindu faith would probably say this, and he's like, the idea is that with things like money, you're just never going to get to the top. And I know that sounds like very trite, and but when you hit when somebody's sort of like talking about it, and you're actually like open to hearing that message, that was critical. And the reason I picked it up, and the reason it was life changing for me was it was, I'd come from, times in my life where I'd made a lot of money, times in my life where I made like very, very little money. And I was, and you go up and down in happiness and all that sort of stuff. But I had realized that when I was making a lot of money, I wasn't particularly happy at that stage of my life. And yet here I was living in this orphanage in Nepal, literally in an orphanage in Nepal. I mean, there was nothing in that village. And I was every day, I was just, like, filled with joy, and I know that sounds super cheesy because 'cause you're like, "Oh, I just, like, lived with the orphans, feeling so joyful." But I read the book 'cause it didn't make any sense. I'm like, "Look, this is a cool adventure, but it's not better than, being able to go to the movies and have, Five Guys hamburgers anytime you want and be warm and, have air conditioning and have heating and have hot showers." Like, it's not better than that. Like, I would never choose this for my life.
Yeah.
So why am I really, really happy every day here? It wasn't sort of like oh, the kids just bring me joy. Yeah, they did, but it just didn't make sense to me because it was never a life that I would choose. So why on earth was I happy there? Why was I like so happy? And so this book was like really clarifying in terms of, you've sort of, or helped me understand, like, being in a world where everybody around you has nothing, you stop comparing yourself, for one thing. You
Mm.
stop sort of, because we can live in wealthy areas, and we live in Connecticut, and there's a lot of money around us. And there's a lot of just like go, go, go. And there's a lot of, oh, well, you have this, but you don't have that. And all that sort of stuff. And to release that, and then to also see all these kids and also just the pace of life really, really slows down. And that's not really reality in America. And so just all the combination of a lot of things, I was like, wow, this is awesome.
How did you when you came back to the States, how did you bring those what you gleaned, how did you bring it back?
Yeah,
Curious.
it's funny. I think about that a lot. In a couple of ways. First of all, how do I bring that back? Second of all, you know, the when you live in, I don't want to call it poverty, but it was. I mean, because I wasn't. I could always go back to something,
Sure.
of worse. But I was living in an environment of relative poverty.
Yeah.
And I was always thinking that because like you got, a meal twice a day, you ate twice a day and you ate everything on your plate because there's not just food around, right? Like you
Mhm.
take a long time to cook food. And I was thinking about like, the excess in America and all that kind of stuff. And I was really thinking, oh, when I go back to America, like everything's going to change. And the truth is I didn't really change me. It's funny. I kind of thought that I'd come back and live this very different life. And I really didn't. I think that I guess the best way for me to think about it is, uh, I'm sure that it changed a lot in me. I think it made me more worldly, and I think the one thing it did for me was because I kept thinking like, "Oh, I'm never gonna waste food again." But then you go to like Outback Steakhouse, you're like, "I can't eat all this." And so there's this whole thing of you can't really bring that. You could maybe, but I couldn't. I didn't feel like I could bring that back with me.
Yeah.
And so instead, I think what I brought back with me was realizing, uh, just dispelling a lot of thoughts that I had around like what like kids need, like what resilience
Mm,
looks like what
mm,
we actually need. Um, and that was helpful in times where I didn't have that much. Do you know what I mean? So I think that that was helpful in sort of like realizing like, oh, well, you don't have to cater to everybody's whim all the time. Everybody's going to be just fine. So I think it hit me there, but I don't think it changed me in the ways I thought it would, which was I'm going to come back and I'm going to make time and space and be peaceful and not work as hard. No, I came back and because I think that you come back and you don't have to, but I had to you have to live in the environment that you live in. You know what I mean? Then when I came back to, New York, it's fast paced and you waste food and you complain about stuff and it's not and I just got back into that world. But I think little things changed me and certainly my
sure,
view of the
sure.
world changed, but it didn't really change who I was as a person, which I would have loved, but it just didn't really do that.
It sounds like it impacted how you show up as a dad, though,
Yeah, I
uh,
think it really did.
in
I
terms
think
of
it
sort
really
of
did.
seeing the resilience of kids.
I think that was the
In what
single
ways?
biggest thing. Is
Yeah.
I think that as a new dad, because I became a dad pretty quickly after that. I mean, I met my wife very quickly after that and became a
Mm,
dad quickly after that. I think what it showed me was it took a lot of fear away from parenting. Because I think parenting is just rooted in fear almost biologically, right? There's just like
mm,
oh my gosh, our kid, if he's not walking by this, or if he's not doing this, or if she's not, blah, 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 like, oh my gosh, she has to sleep. And look, I'm still the psycho that would like sleep under the crib for the first few nights when they were home because I was like, well, what is something going to go wrong? But I think I realized that like, when they would, um, be down or get hurt or something like that, I'm like, they're actually going to be fine. And I think as a parent, and you know this, right? It's like the you it's very hard to describe to kids this thing because it sounds like heroic, but like if somebody like shot at your kid, you'd leap to try to take a bullet for your kid. And the kids sort of say like, yeah, yeah, like, but you know this, right? You're a dad.
yeah,
You would, and it's a very
totally.
strange thing, right? So there is something where you desperately don't want your kid to get hurt. That's obviously an extreme example, but even like if you see your kid like your kid comes home like, oh, this kid was mean. You want to go like murder that other kid, right? There's that. But I think what helped me about Nepal was realizing like, well, if they don't have a cupcake, they're gonna be fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that wasn't
Yeah,
an
yeah.
intellectual thing. That was something that I had seen, and I was like, it alleviated some. I don't think I'm not sure it made me a better parent because I think parents are great. So it didn't make me a better parent. I think it was actually more inward focus where I was able to let some things go about parenting, if that makes sense.
It totally does, yeah. So
Yeah.
you come back, you meet your lovely wife, Liz, and Mary, have kids, and then you write a fiction book called The Hadley Academy for the Improbably Gifted.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that? And what led to
Yeah,
sort of
it's
it feels like a very new I mean, so you've written a
Mhm.
nonfiction sort of memoir, and now you're writing, uh, fiction kind of a la the Chronicles of Narnia or Harry Potter.
it's really funny. Yeah, I mean, it was just something that I just kind of like wanted to do. I came to this realization pretty late in life, that my wife Liz, who obviously, had to tell me. My wife has to tell me a few things. My wife informed me about 10 years ago that I was an introvert. I was like, "Really?" She's like, "Oh, yeah." She's like, you're a huge introvert." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And we realized that through a series of like when I would say things like, you know what I would love for a present one day, just to sort of like go off to this little cabin that we used to visit sometimes on this island off the coast of Maine and just be here for a week. And she's like, I would go insane. I was like, really? Yeah. She's like, okay. Anyway, so with the book, it was one of these things where I just really like to write. Like I've been kind of a writer. I don't know when I would say I started writing, well, no, that's not true. I know it was in senior in high school. Our English teacher gave us this assignment of hey, you have to write a journal every day for 7 days, and I don't care what you write, but just you have to write sometime. I'm not going to read it. If you write, something on the page. You can write the phone book if you want, but I'll give you an A, but just write something. So I did that. I ended up writing every day for 7 days and found, wow, this is my thing. Like, I love this. I love it. So I ended up keeping a journal every night for the next like 11, 12 years. And I only stopped because I went around the world and I turned it into a blog. And so I ended up like keeping a blog instead. I was like, and that was a moment where I was like, is anybody going to find this interesting at all? Because I write in a very specific way, and I would write in a way that would make me laugh, because I would always finish a journal and I would go back and read the journal, and I would be like, because I just cracked myself up, but it wasn't for public consumption at all. And I still have like all those journals. And so it turned into a blog, and people were like, oh yeah, this is actually, or a lot of people were probably like, this is super annoying, but there were people also that liked it. And so people followed me around the world, and that blog became the book Little Princess. But I ended up just really liking writing. And when you like writing, and not everybody does obviously, but like you want to try to tell stories that you think would be awesome, And even though I preferred writing nonfiction stuff, I didn't really want to do that anymore. I just wanted to kind of try something. And so one of the things that Liz then also observed about me, which I hadn't really realized, she's like, you have your job, and then you need like a creative outlet in some way. And so no matter what I was doing, I was always kind of like writing on the side. And I had an opportunity to just write for a while also. And so I did that. By the way, writing seems like a dream job. It is not a dream job. I don't think any writer would. Well, I shouldn't say that about other writers. Writing is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
It's somebody said, a great writer once, I can't remember who it was, Anne Lamott or somebody said, like, I hate writing, but I like having written something. And so that's how I feel
Like
too. I like
it's like working out, right? Like
It's like working. A great analogy. It's a great analogy. And so with this, I was like, I love this kind of genre. I'm like, I would love to just try to create something, just create it. And so it took me a long time to write it, years to write it. And I was doing other things at the time too, but like, I loved it. The book didn't do well. The other book did well. This book didn't do very well, but, um, but I realized at that time also that I didn't want to be like a writer. You know what I mean? Like, it was awesome to do that. I loved it. Felt like a huge accomplishment to be able to publish this. Super grateful to HarperCollins for publishing it. But it was just super, super fun to create this story, and very, very hard. I'm not a good fiction writer. So very, very hard. But yeah, it was just a sort of like another like thing that I wanted to do. And so I just tried it.
fascinating. All right. So that gets us, I think, to NYU Stern, where
Yeah.
for a while at least you were dean of students.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can just walk us through the process of becoming dean of students, why you picked that path, or why that path picked you, and then we'll get into AI.
Yeah, no, it definitely picked me. Yeah, so I came back from Nepal. Liz and I were just getting married. I met her. She's American, but I met her out in Nepal, and I was broke. I'd been living in Nepal for years, and so I was like, okay, I got to go to business school. I got to make some money. So I went to business. So I went to Stern. And then when I was at Stern, that's when this book contract happened, and I ended up becoming a writer instead of going to finance. But loved Stern. I was really involved as a student, as an MBA student. I was, president of the student body and things like that, and just loved it. And so when I left, and when I graduated, rather, I kept, coming back and visiting classes, and people would say, "Oh, could you come and talk about whatever?" So I would do that. I would come and talk about things. And I don't know, I just loved it. And I told them, I was like, hey, listen, if there's ever anything I can do like more permanently here, I think it'd be really fun. It's just like, I just really, really like this place, and I had really close relationships with everybody in the school. And then just, one day they probably about 3-4 years after I graduated, they were like, "Hey, the dean of students role just opened. Would you be interested in this?" And I was like, I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, that feels like a dream job, right?" I mean, like, I'm sure dean of students for like undergrad is a little trickier, because you're dealing with like a lot of disciplinary things, because kids are under 21. But dean of students for an MBA program, where it has a reputation for people being super collaborative, super nice, which it does. Stern is amazing like that. I was like, that's a dream. So it took us about 6 months of like interviewing, things like that. And I don't know, I don't have the insight into how this worked, but I think it was one of these places where they were like, there's a few candidates, but they were like, I think Connor may be a good fit for this, and I really think I was. I really think I was a good fit. So because I'm not I don't have like the brains that a lot of my colleagues had and a lot of people in that school have, but I do have the ability to build relations pretty well. I'm pretty good at that. And I'm a pretty good public speaker. I did a lot of public speaking. And so to be the face of the student body and to be, that I thought that would be probably a pretty good combination for that role, but I wasn't sure, but they decided that it would be. And I was super, super grateful because yeah, I did. I got that role and just loved it. Really, really loved it. I did it for 10 years and it was wonderful. Like you get to know just incredibly bright people. You really stay on the cutting edge of like everything because you're constantly keeping up with, from one year to the next, just like industry changes and job changes and you have people change, like just it's, they say it's a 2-year cycle of MBAs coming in and out. And you're like, oh, wow. So this is now what's important to people. And then, I took them through COVID and took them through like all this stuff. And it was really, really interesting. You deal with, some real highs, real lows, like things go wrong, in a big student body like that, especially in New York, but probably everywhere. And so all of a sudden you're like, okay, you deal with real human issues, real human problems and issues and challenges. But for the most part, I just loved what Stern was doing. I really like it. Again, I'm still there, so I clearly like
Yeah.
love it. It feels like family to me. And and I just love it. And I think that the thing that I loved the most about it was that just every day was interesting. Every day you're surrounded by just awesome people and doing awesome things. And it just felt like a dream job. It felt like a dream job that was created for me. It kind of like fit the things that I was pretty good at that stage of my life. And it was just awesome.
I love that. So you mentioned public speaking, and you do, as you said, you did a lot of public speaking in that role, and you still do it. And I've seen it, and you're very good. But one of the things that I've seen you write about when you speak publicly, you sort of have over time offered different tips and tricks on your social media
Mhm.
accounts. And one of the things you've said is to make a small mistake early on.
Yeah.
And I have never heard a speech coach say that. And I would love for you. We're going to jump into AI next, but before we get there, I would love for you to
Yeah.
tell us about that sort of tip up your sleeve.
Yeah.
Why
So
why that? Why make a small mistake?
yeah, these are all things. I mean, the only speech advice I ever really got was this one guy who's an amazing public speaker, and he said, just practice until you'd rather literally go outside and dig a ditch than say it again, and then say it like 10 more times. So that was always important to me because I think public speaking is really just confidence. I think it's really just that. I'm not sure that it requires much else. And confidence, I think, comes from knowing the material down. Do you know what I mean? Like you
Mhm.
could do it in your sleep because as soon as you get up there and you're like worried that you have to remember something, your confidence is shot. You're going to be focused on remembering rather than really trying to say this in the most interesting way. And also, I think the best public speakers are the ones that you feel like you're in the room with them. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's not obviously saying anything revolutionary, but like instead of like the big grand, I'm speaking to a room. Do you know what I mean? Like, but people want to feel
Totally,
like
totally.
this is why like the great presidents, of our time, what like I think the thing that they really have in common is like you could imagine just they're just talking to you, like no matter who they are, right? They're just like they're all like that, whether you love them or hate them, they feel like that. And
Yeah, it's the
uh,
have a beer test. Like,
yeah, that's to have a
yeah,
beer
that
test, right?
you
It's
want to have a beer with them or
absolutely
you don't want to have a beer with them.
a
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And I think that that really resonates with people. So the small mistake thing is something that I was trying to at one point kind of codify, like, I'm like, what is it? Because I have a ton of practice with public speaking. So it's just that. It's not I wasn't like, boys, but like anybody that does anything for years and years and years, you're gonna get good at it. So I'm really comfortable. I really enjoy it. But the small mistake one is a funny one because what I realized, one of the things that makes me very confident up on stage is that I really and truly believe that people in the audience want me to succeed. You know what I mean? Like because everybody I think is up there and like there's a lot of people on, in the audience thinking like, man, better you than me, man. Because public speaking can be really terrifying.
Right.
And but once I really deeply understood this concept um that people are rooting for you, it really gives you a lot of confidence, right? Like and that really, really helped. But I think the small mistake comes from if you really want the audience on your side, uh, it's what my my accounting professor at Stern used to say. he's called moving the mouse. Like he'd be droning on, and then he'd say something just totally bizarre, and everybody'd be like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "It's like moving the mouse, and your screen pops back to life." And it's like that, right? So anytime you sort of stumble or go off script a little bit, the audience is back, right? Because they're not just like hearing a speech; they're back with you instantly. And it's an amazing technique, I think, to sort of like feel like, first of all, it really is like having a beer because we stumble over our words and things like that. But if you're just flawless, like, anyway, this is how AI works and blah, 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 as opposed to like, this is how it works. And oh my gosh, what was I going to say? Oh, yes, right. That's, you know what I mean? Like if you do that on stage, everybody's with you, right? I mean, like
So
it's like
yeah.
moving the mouse. And by the way, it happens enough accidentally that it's not like I planned it. It's just it kept happening because I would constantly forget things.
Yeah.
But I was on stage in front of 500 people in Chicago 2 weeks ago, and ChatGPT wouldn't load, and I was doing a demo. Kept forgetting, right? And I was like, so I'm just standing there trying to do two things at once. I'm trying to figure out why it's not loading, and second of all, talk to 500 people who are staring at me, and I was like, okay. And that was, I mean, luckily, like I've done this enough, but I was just very much like, okay, well, let's see. Like, I guess now we're gonna probably gonna have that dinosaur game. I guess we could do that instead. Like but it's this thing where I knew as people started to remember, everybody was like, oh my gosh, please praying that this guy would pull this through because they're rooting
Yeah.
for you. And
Yeah.
those small mistakes do two things. They sort of like move the mouse, they sort of like pop the screen back to life. And they also really remind the audience that we're on this guy's side. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want you to succeed. And if you can do that, and people say like, oh, that's manipulative. I'm like, yeah, when it's planned, it is. And I probably do it planned probably like once out of every 10 times or something like that, because I try to force myself to put myself into a position where I'm going to stumble, so it comes naturally. But if I find myself not stumbling, I'll pretend to be remembering or something like that. And in those times, every one out of every 10 times, it's complete audience manipulation. But a joke is also audience manipulation. You're trying to make them
Yeah.
laugh so they like you. Like, the whole thing is audience
The whole
manipulation.
thing's yeah, it's all
Yeah.
performance.
So I don't so I
All
don't
performance.
I don't even I don't think of it as a bad thing, but I want people to sort of like understand that. So it's because I think otherwise people think the best speeches are just flawless. I don't think that's true.
I love it, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Uh, one of my one of my great fears in life is boring people, Connor. And
Yes.
so when I give remarks, I carry behind the lectern a bag of cushy balls, and I just throw them at the audience, and it's a way of breaking the
That's
screensaver.
hilarious.
But-
I love it.
So all right, Connor. So you're dean of students, and now you're head of AI, and you have a very interesting approach to
Yeah.
adoption of AI. And again, it's sort of on this theme of reinvention, but reinvention for businesses. But you have this very interesting approach that is really quite unlike anything else that I've seen in the market. And as someone who has been a client of yours, it's the reason that I hired you, because you bring a different perspective, and it's not just use cases. And if you drop this data in and ask this very specific query, AI will dump out a very specific set of answers. You come from a wildly different perspective, and I'm wondering if you can just share with our listeners like what that perspective is.
Yeah. So, it's worthwhile to know that I'm not a tech person at all. Like, as you just heard, like I don't have any tech background whatsoever. And so when all this started, 2 years ago now, I probably discovered it probably in January 2023, I'm guessing, but not that long. But had been out for 6 weeks or something like that. I kind of like saw it, but I hadn't tested it myself. So, my wife Liz was like, "Oh, you should really test this out. It's really powerful." And so I tried it, but at first I just wasn't sure what to do with it, right? And then I ended up going down a rabbit hole and being like, and after like 3 hours, I was like, this is really going to change everything. And trying to figure out like, okay, what can we do for NYU? What should we be doing for NYU, et cetera, et cetera. And the first thing I did was, first of all, I signed up for a lot of online like machine learning classes and AI classes, things like that, to learn stuff. And then I also went to faculty lectures around AI, and like what this thing is, how neural networks work, everything like that. And I started realizing very quickly that none of those things helped me. Do you know what I mean? Like, knowing more about AI, kind of quote unquote AI or machine learning, it didn't help me become a better user. It didn't seem to have anything to do with it, actually. And that was very, very strange, because that's just not usually the case. Like, the more you know about Excel and how formulas are put together and stuff, you're going to be better at Excel, right? So like, but this just wasn't the case. And so I was like, well, this is strange. And so I started going out and helping companies. And the reason I was doing that was because I was trying to just get use cases for our our MBA program. I was like, hey, what, they're like, well, why don't you come out here and teach? I was like, yeah, if I teach you guys, I'd love to hear how you guys would use it, and then I'll take those use cases back and teach our students. So it was just a great, symbiotic relationship. And I would go out and train a lot of like financial services or healthcare or something, but like sort of executive groups. And a funny thing happened, which was I would do it and I would kind of teach the use cases and things like that. And they would be over the moon. And I kind of walked away being like, oh, that was great. And I did a really good job on that and all that sort of stuff. But then a funny thing happened, which was I would go and check back in, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks later. I was like, hey, so, how's it going? What are you guys doing now? And they're like, oh my gosh, the use cases are phenomenal. And I was like, well, which use cases? And they were like, the ones that you showed us. And I, before going into like healthcare, I would like Google top 10 use cases for healthcare. But I was like, but I don't know anything about like you're using my use case. Like I don't know anything about healthcare, right? So it was this moment where I was like, okay, like something's off here, right? Because this doesn't make any sense. Why aren't they using this 30 times a day like me, right? So and it started making me think, typically we've always taught things in use cases, but teaching this in use cases really, because your brain doesn't really know what it is, it really locks your brain into certain it makes your brain think like this is a tool that you take off the shelf for this use case and for this use case, because that's what everything else is, right? That's what Salesforce is, that's what Excel is. You use it when you need to create a valuation model or something, or you need this when you need sort of like capture this customer data or something. But this is very, very different. And so I kind of ended up tearing up that framework and being like, all right, it works, but it's not doing what I want it to do, which is actually transform companies. Like I want this to transform people. And this is not doing that. This is just teaching them a tool that they can use every once in a while. Like that's not what this is. It can be, but like, holy cow, the companies that do that are not going to get ahead. The ones where everybody changes this. And so I ended up talking to, just a lot of people that understand, like neuroscientists kind of people, and also executive coaches who really understand brain stuff really well. And just talking to them about like, well, what do you think is going wrong? And this is where I sort of ended up coming to this notion that this was actually not about a typical or traditional learning curve where you learn, calculus or something like that, and then or like, French, and you go off, you learn French for a few years, and then you go off and you use French. You're now fluent and you use it. This is much more like, like a treadmill or getting into shape or something where there's nothing to learn. Like we already know that you've taken fewer calories than, and you exercise and that's it. But it's only behavior. It's only like there's nothing to learn to get into shape. Literally nothing. Everybody already knows. And I was like, I think that this is just a behavioral thing. So I kind of like was mixing. I was like, okay, so some use cases, but I was like, actually, this turns out to really be only behavior and change management. And so I use use cases to demonstrate this model and this framework that I have, but the framework is no longer like easy use cases to advanced, or here's how sales, here's how HR. Now it's like, how do we, why are we like flawed communicators? Why are we flawed decision makers? And how can this augment those things and help us to do those big things at work rather than here's how you use it in sales? It was, and that's when it really took off. But it was really, really fascinating.
I love your I mean it's this fascinating flip from a technical perspective, as you said,
Yeah.
to really a leadership and behavior change, human behavior change perspective, which is taking the sort of most technical adoptions and flipping it on its head, right? This is not just loading on a new software platform, let's say, but it's really teaching people um, essentially to engage with a new teammate. And
Yeah.
that's sort of what you're saying is it's a new teammate and you engage it in a human way and it will spit back human responses. And so kind of one of the analogies you also use is that the adoption of AI is sort of akin to um, electricity, the adoption of
Yeah.
electricity a little over a century ago. Can you sort of talk about why you think it's so powerful?
Yeah, it's funny, right? It sort of goes to the fact of why I don't teach in use cases anymore. Because I think sometimes we hear like, oh, it's like the internet, or it's like the steam engine, or it's like electricity, but that doesn't help people use it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just like this is how powerful it is. But my focus is always on like how do we actually get people using it? How do we actually change
Yeah,
people's
yeah.
behavior? And not just say this is a behavioral change, but like so now what do we do? And so the analogy sometimes I give is like if you went back in time and to before the light bulb was invented and you gave people a light bulb, people would instantly know how this would make their life better, right? I mean, like, there was they wouldn't have an open flame in their daughter's bedroom anymore, and the factories could stay open later, and streets were safer. Yeah, just a million things, right? The light bulb would be great. But then if you went back after that and you said you have something even, more powerful, and people would be like, well, what is that? And you said, it's electricity, or, forgetting the fact that light bulbs need electricity. But like, and people would say like, well, if it's so powerful, like, how do we use it? And uh, that's a very hard question to answer, right? Because it's too broad. I mean, and it depends 100% on who you're talking to and what they do, right? Because if somebody was to actually ask you like, hey, how do you use electricity? I could tell you 3, 4, or 5 ways I'm using electricity literally right now, right? Literally, like I'm warm, I'm inside, I'm being lit, I'm talking through a microphone, you and I, there's all this electricity
Yeah.
happening right now. But we didn't think like, hey, Jonathan, like, we're gonna get on to how do you think we should use electricity to make this conversation better? Right? Like we just ran into a problem and we're instinctively using electricity to solve that problem. But if you're talking to podcasters, or if you're talking to doctors or coal miners or something like that, like the quote unquote use cases for electricity are going to be wildly different. And also, you just can't even name them all, right? They're just you could stand up in front of people for an hour and list all the ones people would still walk away and be like, I guess the light bulb's cool, but I'm not. Why would I need to? I don't know, running a CAT scan for. It's like I don't have to run CAT scans for anybody, so I guess I don't really need electricity. Anyway, it's interesting to me as an analogy to sort of say like ChatGPT is like electricity. Like it's when you start listing use cases, you're really limiting yourself. Instead, forget about AI for a second. Like, what do you do? What do you need to do? And then you start bringing the AI in after that. But that's a real change management thing, and it's tough because it doesn't look like a human companion. It looks like Google, So it's hard to get our brains around that. So that's what I tend to focus on.
So two last questions for you. The first is if I'm a leader in a classroom or a business or a nonprofit, and I'm really kind of either scared or just sort of taken aback by ChatGPT, and I don't even know where to start. What's one thing I could do to start?
Yeah, I mean, I
ChatGPT
think
or otherwise, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In
I think
general.
with ChatGPT is first of all a great place to start. I was just getting asked this. I was at the Washington Post, and this big guy there was asking me this thing about. He's like, "So you're saying just start?" I'm like, "I am, and I'm not." Like, I think that when we say like just practice, it's not always that great. It's like just eat less and exercise. Just start running. You're gonna be fine. It's hard, right? It's harder than people think. I think. So what I would say is like just have it open either on your desk or just on your phone or something like that, and the next problem you're going to do, literally, like I write things down. I have like I could show you like all my little sticky notes here that remind me to do this kind of stuff, which is you've run into a task, just try it. So like, okay, so what are you doing next? So like, well, I gotta, cook. Okay, here's what you do. Tell it what you're doing and see how it can help. Like, oh, well, I gotta go pick up my kid. Okay, tell it what you're trying and I got to figure out like how, our kids are going to sort of like, they have to, figure out a service project. Okay. Tell it like, or I got to write this email. Okay. Tell it. Or like, I have to brainstorm this. Okay. Just tell it, just write down literally what you do. And then just tell, even if it seems like there's no way ChatGPT can help, just try. And I'm not saying just practice. I'm saying there's a formula here. Like you have to write down what you do and then actually systematically apply it. So that's how I think about it.
I love it. I love it. Last question. You're prolific on social media. Um, and I wonder, this is a question that I ask every guest. If you had essentially one tweet left, what would you say?
Whew, that's a good one. You mean before like death or before the end of social media?
Oh, before,
I
yeah,
would,
okay. The end, your end, not the end of social
yeah,
media.
my end. I would say the last thing I would say is, you don't have to do what everybody else does. And that's my tweet, so I can't explain it, of course. But the idea is just, it's just so easy to copy people, and we want to. It feels like that's the path to success in writing, in social media, in work, everything else. You're better off, you're gonna add more value being yourself, and the reason is that if you're trying to be somebody else, people are just gonna choose that other person. They're gonna choose if you're trying to write sort of like a Harry Potter-like book, people are just gonna read Harry Potter. They're probably not gonna read your derivative thing. Your best bet is to bring what you bring to this world because it's unique, and a lot of people are not gonna find value in it, but you keep tweaking that and keep tweaking that until you can find the usage of it, and then you're gonna be very, very good at it because you already know how to do it, and it's gonna come naturally and all that kind of stuff, and also, you're gonna have something unique to offer, and that feels daunting. I don't mean like create a new language, but I just mean figure out like what you do well, like, and because that's what people are going to ultimately, and it might take some time, and you might have to keep
Sure.
tweaking it, keep tweaking it, but you will eventually get there.
Thanks so much, Conor, for being here and for walking us through all the reinventions and then AI. It's a joy to spend some time with you.
You too, man. Thanks for having me. I love talking to you.
Absolutely.
What I'm most intrigued by as I reflect on the discussion with Conor are the ways that he has reinvented himself over and over, grabbing a hold of some idea, trend, or goal and just sprinting after it. I think it's super inspiring. He said that he keeps putting himself in interesting positions because he doesn't think intrinsically he's an interesting person. Now, I might disagree with that assertion, but I think a lot of leaders carry that same quiet doubt, even as we're doing remarkable things. And I love that Conor's answer isn't to fake confidence or fake it till you make it, but instead, it's to keep grabbing the coattails of opportunity and figure it out along the way. Next time on Stumbling Blocks, I'm honored to bring you an episode unlike any I've done before. It's a sit-down interview with Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and his wife, Rebecca, together for their first joint interview since leaving office. We did it in the Attorney General's office at Belmont University, where he is Dean of the Law School, the first in-person conversation we've had on this podcast. Attorney General Gonzales is the son of migrant workers who rose to become the 80th Attorney General of the United States and now Dean of the Belmont Law School. Rebecca was there through every high and low, and it's a conversation they have about marriage, service, resilience, and what happens after the spotlight fades. You do not want to miss it. I'll see you then on The Stumble.